Hello, welcome to Dive into World Building. So today we're going to talk about precociousness. And this is actually kind of an interesting topic because I'm not sure whether it was clear based on the single word what we were actually going to talk about. But I think everybody has read a book in which there is a child genius. Right? I mean,
Right.
I think okay, maybe there are some people out there who haven't. But I mean, a lot of protagonists out there are child geniuses. And child geniuses are actually not the only way to do precociousness. So I'm hoping we can kind of branch out from there. But there are lots of examples. I mean, so I'm thinking specifically of like Ender's Game, where you have, the 3 child geniuses, not just one, but 3.
Of course, they were like out looking for them, though, so that's why there were that many.
They were breeding them specifically. But okay, just because, so let's be clear here. Just because you've set up your story properly to background and provide structure for the existence of a child genius does not mean that as an author you have not deliberately made the choice to make your protagonist a child genius, right? Because probably, I really need my protagonist to be a child genius came first. And then after that, it was like, okay, so how can I set it up so it's really, really believable that there would be a child genius, right? I mean,
I'm
not sure. We don't actually talk much about prodigies, like musical prodigies. I mean, I don't see as many stories about prodigies, but definitely like these incredibly smart kids who are able to, somehow exert power over their environments, even as people are trying to exert power on them. That is definitely pretty common. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that it's not a bad thing to have child geniuses as your protagonists necessarily, but it comes with some complications, and I honestly think that the lives of prodigies and people who are considered child geniuses in our world are not that uncomplicated. I mean, I whenever I read about child geniuses, they always seem to have a really difficult time fitting in anywhere, reaching out and creating relationships with people. They kind of yeah, I don't know. I mean, and like, what do you do if you're not part of a school community, for example, because you're just too voraciously geniusy and you are eating up everything that's given to you more quickly than, I mean, I know, for example, my dad was advanced 2 years in school by his dad, and he was not even considered a child genius, right? His dad just thought he was really smart, but that meant that he was 2 years younger than everybody else he was interacting with, and there were some distinct complications there. So you get age discrepancy. Yeah, I mean, Ender is strikingly able to create alliances with other people in my mind, for example. Like, yeah, he has bullies and stuff, but he's also very, very, very able to reach out and create allies, and I think that's not necessarily always the case.
Although weren't they sort of all of an age as well, though, which helped?
Right.
Well, okay, so these were all the winnowed out child geniuses, I guess.
Well, I mean, that is the thing with Ender, is that the teachers are very much, it is a controlled environment. This is not Lord of the Flies with the one kid who's an outlier. Having come into this late, I want a stricter definition of what are we defining as child genius?
Oh, actually, we hadn't gotten into that, but I was planning to go there. So, yeah, I think there are a lot of different things. I don't see that many books written about like piano prodigies and stuff like that. I mean, because there are a lot of different forms of intelligence, and there are a lot of different people who can be very, very advanced.
Alvin Songmaker?
Sorry?
Alvin Songmaker.
Okay. I'm not going to argue with you.
I'm just sort of going, I guess Orson Scott Card really likes child geniuses.
Well,
I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
There's, what was the...
But, so I think that assuming that a child genius is some kind of misanthropic or socially maladjusted loner is also a weird stereotype as well.
Yeah, that is definitely so. But I don't think they're necessarily bad at social interactions.
I think that Wesley Crusher has ruined the child genius category for quite another generation. That's my vote.
Yeah. And I think we'll agree, but that's yeah, I think the socially precocious is not a characteristic that usually goes with the mentally precocious.
Well, so this is actually getting more interesting here because I don't want to spend an hour on child geniuses. I don't think there's enough there. But when we talk about precociousness, there are a lot of different ways to be precocious, right? I mean, precociousness basically is talking about being more advanced in some way in your maturity, and it's often intellectual, but you can be socially precocious. You can be considered to be sexually precocious, and I'm going to actually try to go to very difficult places with that later. But I'm trying to sort of, looking more mature than you are, being older than you are. It's more advanced in some way, right?
It has to be about children, though, because once you are an adult, you're not, the term precocious no longer applies.
Right.
Yeah.
Once you reach physical maturity and adulthood, then there's some kind of weird limbo where all adults are considered the same, except that some adults are adultier than others or something like that.
Right. I think so too. And have you guys ever seen the movie Shine?
Yeah.
That is a really stunning film.
I have not seen it.
Yeah,
it's really good.
So it's about this musical prodigy, but he was also had real family problems and ended up going to a very, very difficult place before he found his way back to what he loved at the end of the story. So, and I think that whole adulthood erases precociousness thing applies too. I mean, I don't know. I guess we're more adults can be really, really amazingly good at what they do, but they're never considered precocious, I suppose.
So one of the things about stories like Shine is that they're presented as stories about precocity, but in some way they are actually it's useful to look at them also as explorations of genderedness. And I'm sorry, does somebody have a bird or something in the background?
I have a bird. I hear a TV though.
It could be coming from you, Brian.
It is. I've got him. His sound turned all the way
really
down.
okay because I just Here, I'll hit mute again and see if it goes away.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, he's in a more public place. So.
Oh, okay. Thank you. It was just hard to think. So it can be an exploration of genderedness and the ways in which emotional intelligence is not expected of certain people, which is where the trouble starts. And so often, if you look at women who are girls who are considered precocious, the expectations on them are different.
Yeah.
And they're not allowed to be as socially misaligned.
Uh-huh.
And so I think the idea that exceptional talent leads to social isolation is actually not accurate, because what it actually is that exceptionality in one place is exacerbating the other forms of exception granted to, quote, ordinary, unquote, people of that category.
Sure. I definitely see your point. It's a good point.
There was, my mom said she read, I believe it was historic fiction about Mozart's sister.
Huh.
And apparently she was even more talented than he was, but nobody cared because she was a girl.
Huh.
Yeah, so.
I just saw that somebody had memed that and was spreading it around again. And that is one of the things that was happening classically, was that girls who were exceptional were actually told to hide it.
Yeah.
And it's true throughout history. And so we have very, very few examples of this. And most of them turn out to be like warriors and rather aggressive, because that's what they had to be in order to transcend the box they were being shoved into.
Yep.
And this is how you end up with like Qing Shi being history's most astonishing pirate.
Yeah. That is a very impressive.
How you end up with, the Joan of Arcs and the other exceptional women is that they, they don't come out of nowhere. They must have also been extraordinary children as well.
Yeah.
Just nobody tells the stories of them being extraordinary children.
Joan of Arc was directing armies at 16, so
right.
I mean, she was concurrently with her fighting and her great deeds was a child at the time, from our perspective at least.
Right.
So maybe not from the localized perspective. So I think that one of the things that is really key to this whole topic is the idea of expectations, because
yes.
Really what we're looking at here is not just an empirical amount of some talent or some ability, but more than somebody around you expects, right?
So it has to do with a disparity between the expectations and the performance.
Uh-huh.
Because as I'm sort of thinking about this, because I've taken this down a gendered rabbit hole, I'm looking at the ways that little girls who were made motherless for whatever reason were often expected to step into a very adult role, and it wasn't seen as precocity on their part.
Yes.
It was just expected. Expected in a way that, yes, there are histories of young boys being expected to, quote, man up, unquote, but
yeah.
We have that phrase little man, but we don't really. Little women was a sort of a shocking thing, because it's not really the phrase used, is it, even now?
Yeah.
When we say the little woman, it often just refers to somebody's wife.
Yeah.
Which is a weird, belittling term. So we are separating between the precocity of youth and being prescient, or being, sort of a premature anti-fascist or other people who are outside of their time, right?
Yeah, I think should probably just keep it to like exceptionally intelligent or exceptionally talented in some way.
Or perceived
well,
as
I mean,
being.
that's okay. So that's the good side of it, is when we identify people as precocious because of their intelligence or their ability to do a skill or to be an artist or whatever it is. I mean, people love it when somebody has a great talent, right?
Yeah.
Are we conflating precocity and prodigies?
What?
Are we conflating precociousness and prodigies?
I don't think so. We've been talking about them as related, but not congruent.
Okay. Right. I think I wanted to underline the distinction.
Sure, go ahead.
So, you can be a prodigy forever.
Yeah.
You can be an adult who was a child prodigy and still be considered exceptional. One of the interesting stories that gets told more in literary fiction, I think, than in genre is the I hate to use the word tragedy because I think it's overblown, but what happens when you were a child prodigy and now you're not in the same measure advanced beyond your peers. Your peers have caught up now. And it does interesting things to the psyche.
Yeah.
If you grew up as a child prodigy and now you're just ordinary.
Yeah.
In genre, we don't explore it coming from the place of having been a child prodigy. We come at it from other sorts of exception. What happens if you lose your magic?
Yeah, I think you see that more in literary novels of like,
right.
where like I was super talented and now I'm just this washed up has-been and I'm only 30 and blah blah blah. My life is miserable.
Yep.
So,
well, I mean, I know at least a couple of people in IRL, as they say, who were given IQ tests as children and, ended up getting a hugely high score, but it didn't end up turning out very well for them because they grew up thinking that they were the cat's pajamas, and then they ended up having quite ordinary lives. And this is exactly what Tat Cat was talking about, where they're grappling with the idea that, well, okay, here I am, and I should have been something or whatever.
So I want to push back on that narrative because that's very, very victim. I perceive that as victim blaming. That it's a result of their ego not keeping up with their circumstance, and I want to talk about what happens if you are Ender, but then you're 30 years old and you're not viewed the way that you were.
Right.
I mean, it's not. If a child is perceived as precocious and treated that way, I don't think it's a child's fault for thinking that nobody prepares that child for the fact that their peers will catch up.
Right. No. I'm not. If I meant that it was the person, if I implied that it was a person thought, that was an accident.
I'm
not
imputing your intent. I'm just wanting that clarification.
Yeah, absolutely. But anyway,
I should perhaps reveal
just add one more thing. My mom and dad were vehemently against IQ testing for a number of reasons, but that was one of the reasons.
Sure.
Was that, this this is opening up the potential for a huge problem that doesn't need to be there.
So this may be a point where I'm sorry I entered this conversation late because apparently I need to unmask myself for, during the actual webcast. I was IQ tested once at 7 years old and once again at 12, I think it was, and that actually led to me having 3 years in sort of a walled garden of education where I was grouped together with a very small number of peers in Los Angeles from the school district. And for me, it was a safe haven and a useful place. Because being an intellectually advanced child outside of that system and dealing with racialization and dealing with gender all at once was a huge amount of pressure.
Yeah.
And there, to be in a place where for 3 years, going as hard and fast as I could was really encouraged, as opposed to being in a place where it was resented and stifled was a huge difference. And not having had those years of flowering probably would have been really difficult. It was difficult to be kicked out of that because the school system didn't have a high school for us, so we scattered. And re-entering the world at 15, where we were back to the ranks of don't have airs about it. Don't make people feel bad. Where all of the social skills were so much more highly valued, and it, luckily for me, I wasn't lacking those skills, but there is nothing I could have done to have made anything better. I've looked at it again, and what would have been required was a consistent performance of myself as average and ordinary for the comfort of those around me.
Yeah.
And that is that can be intensely difficult. I also had, I'm sorry, Kat, were you not done?
I was just going to say that's, I noticed it in an interesting sort of multi-layered way, because it was definitely exacerbated by gender and racialization. If I'd been a white boy, I think it would have been very, very different.
Yeah.
Especially a white Christian boy of middle-class parents and everything else.
Yeah. So, Kat, having said that, I will also say that I had the various tests as well, but we didn't have, we had programs in some of the schools. The elementary school, I think, had one, and the middle school had great books or gifted classes, but not a full program. And there wasn't a lot of support. There seemed to be more the attitude of, we'll pull you out of your regular class and make you look different and teach you these things that we think are they're classic literature, and you can handle them, so we'll throw them at you, and then we'll throw you back in the mainstream and let you try to deal with your peers. And so, and there was no support for people who were, all right, so I have ADD, which means that I had the IQ, I have the smarts, I have the potential, which has got to be one of my least favorite words in the entire freaking world, but I didn't have the support. I was expected to do well without having been taught how to manage I'm 53, so when I was in school, ADD wasn't a thing that girls had. It was barely a thing that boys had. So expecting the kind of support that I needed for that wouldn't be fair. But at the same time, I wasn't. It was difficult. It was expectations that I should be doing very well and better than anybody else, because otherwise I wasn't living up to my freaking potential. It's, you expect things of people because they learn to read faster, or they're better with numbers than somebody of their age or gender ought to be.
It might be useful.
A mess.
It might be useful to talk about the ways in which we currently live in a culture where it's expected that everybody hits their milestones by certain normed ages, because this is what creates this, right? We assume, oh, you'll be reading by X age and you'll be able to do this kind of maths by this age. And if we don't have this kind of expectation that everybody is advancing in lockstep, some of these frictions disappear. If we talk about multiple intelligences, these frictions disappear. If we stop assuming that IQ means anything other than the ability to answer certain kinds of tests and work out certain kinds of puzzles, this kind of friction disappears. But as it is, we have this perfect storm right now of expecting that everybody does it at a certain time. If you're slower than this time, well, we have labels for that. And it's expected that you'll always be slower than that. Where people have, in the same way that they have physical growth spurts, if you observe children, you'll see them have intellectual growth spurts. And cognitive growth spurts. And all of a sudden they became able to do this or that or the other. And the fact that we don't allow for that, for the convenience of institutionalized learning, makes it really difficult for all sorts of people.
Change is not permitted.
And so precocity is sort of the glamorous end of that. But it's still a symptom of a set of decisions that have been taken societally.
Well, and there's also so okay, I'm having a complicated thought.
Okay.
So the advantages of having a normed educational system are that you are able to roll it out across a larger population. That comes with the attendant problems of, there are so many students who need to participate in this that we don't have the ability to adapt to all of their idiosyncrasies, right?
But that's because we presume that only a certain number of people should be engaged in the education of children.
Well, okay, so sure, because whatever it is, this model is that we've expanded out in the name of getting everybody through school. It has some problems. So we need more people in it. We need more. I mean, we're not going to go into the fact that teachers need to be paid more and there need to be, whatever. It needs to be a much bigger societal investment. Let's just set that aside for a second. But what I'm going to say then is, okay, so you have this thing. It's good in some ways because education used to be only for elites. But then what you have is this large grinding system that has these very specific types of expectations, and deviating from those expectations in either direction is problematic. Because, there are the consequences of deviating in a slower way are very different from the consequences of deviating in a faster way. But the system has a lot of inertia, right?
It's the whole point of systems.
So it has a lot of inertia, and it doesn't have a lot of responsiveness to. It has some, right? But there's a lot. Parents are expected to put in a lot of effort figuring out where their kids can be best helped by the system. And of course, this becomes more difficult depending on how willing the system is to accommodate people of your type. Right? Will the people at the school listen to you if if you have a certain skin color, will the expectations be different? Or if you are of a particular gender, will the expectations be different? I know that my daughter was told to slow down on a number of occasions, which was very, very annoying. And then, ironically, she was later labeled as someone who was on the slow side by a school because she has vision difficulties.
Right.
So it's there are some advantages to cookie cutters, right? Because they allow you to make a lot of cookies quickly. But they end up cutting off pieces of individuals that are not great, right?
So what I talk about is I liken it to what happened when we started to go for off the rack clothing.
Yeah.
Off the rack clothing is awesome for a certain percentage of, or a certain proportion of the bell curve. But if you're not within that sweet spot, it's really terrible.
Yeah.
Whether it's because you're too tall, too short, too skinny, or too fat, or
it's
not
terrible for babies,
lumpy in the right places.
Just generally. Because babies don't conform to sizes. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but like, yes, absolutely, you're correct.
I've seen it create anxieties because we label the sizes starting from infancy to teenhood. We label those sizes by age until we abruptly stop.
Yeah.
You end up with children who are, precociously sized.
Yeah.
You end up with newborns who have to wear 9 months clothes, and it makes their parents act a little weird. But overall, back when we had bespoke clothing, or one at a time clothing, people had much smaller wardrobes.
Yeah.
But they were fitted to that person, unless, I'm not going to disregard the fact that there were people who were wearing hand-me-downs and that they weren't altered, or who were wearing secondhand clothing of other sorts. But in general, we've lost the idea as a society that it's okay to have things custom crafted for oneself.
Yeah.
Even if one isn't part of the most moneyed elite.
Yeah.
We are now at a place where we believe that only the most moneyed elite should have custom things, or if you are significantly disabled.
It's economic. A lot of that's economics, just because
it is.
You can go on Etsy, you can have something handmade for you, and it's going to cost several hundreds of dollars.
Well, but let's not. But
or you can go get a T-shirt for $5 at Walmart.
Well, yes, but that is about having the money to do that.
But I think one of the things that Kat's talking about is that, for example, in the Great Depression, there was a lot of clothing that was made for people by their moms, and that was pretty standard. Like flour sacks were made with floral prints on them because they knew that the moms were going to take the flour sacks and turn them into clothes for the kids. And I'm guessing that those clothes pretty much fit because they were made for the kids, and that was.
I think they were baggier to accommodate
accommodate growth, right?
Accommodate growth and accommodate, handing it down from one kid to the next.
Sure.
But it was a certain sort of normalized fit.
Yeah.
Of this is why you're wearing that kind of clothes. I mean, when we look at the there's always been a class divide in how well clothing fits. Clearly, we completely derailed. Sorry.
No, it's okay. We'll get back.
Where the uppermost classes would have things tightly fitted to their bodies that were made for just that one person, and the lower classes would have something made quickly and,
right.
Here's your T-tunic because you can just belt that thing. So
let's take that and turn it into a
normal idea. This is a normal idea, but when it comes to education and when it comes to how people are classified, various other factors become complications for dealing with where a specific person is on that track between where are they compared to their peers when it comes to learning things or being able to demonstrate skills.
Sure. So on that note, let's ask whether intellectual precociousness interacts with class. And yes, absolutely it does.
Yes.
There's a lot more room for people who have money to back up their demands. If they need to have things adjusted for them, right?
Well, it is one of the stressors about, I happen to be able to partake in a unusually well-funded public school system for my children right now. And some of the stress that's happening is that because of the way we fund schools in the U.S., traditionally using property taxes, which is a whole nother argument.
Yeah.
The property taxes here are very high. And that allows for a certain amount of access to specialists that poorer children would not normally have, because their parents wouldn't have the resources to engage these things privately. And we have a tension amongst the people who are the disproportionately tax-paying class. Whether that's accurate or not, we'll just let that ride as a self-description.
Okay.
About whether they should be paying for other people's children. And this is a tension that comes from how we think of ourselves as a society, and whether we are an aggregate of individuals or whether we are a larger social unit that needs to succeed as a grouping.
Yeah. Yep.
So.
I kind of wanted to make sure that I brought up the idea of weaponizing precociousness, because I don't want to get off this topic without looking at it.
Yes.
And what I'm referring to is things like Timmy Rice being killed because he was playing with a toy gun in a playground. And people who saw him somehow magically decided that he looked very mature and dangerous, and said that that was somehow a justification for killing him.
We should talk about neoteny and perceptions of age across groups to discuss that one. So
sure, take it on.
One of the issues is that East Asians. So I should define this for the webcast. I think neoteny is the appearance of childlikeness, which includes but is not exclusively or necessarily about big eyes and rounded features, and it's the thing that we do when we're illustrating to express kawaii or chibi or these other things that anime is using Japanese terms for. But so there's a general perception that the age perception of Black people living amongst white people is difficult because white people mistake Black children for being older, and they also don't recognize the signs of age in non-white physiognomy. So East Asians are perceived as younger, Black people are perceived as younger because non-European skin ages differently and shows signs of age differently, and those aren't recognized. But going back to Tamir Rice, it's always true that young Black children are perceived as much older than their age and treated as if they are much older than their age, while privileged white people, and I am specifically saying privileged white people, are perceived as younger well into their 30s.
Yeah.
Not because they look younger, but because they are given the opportunity to be I can only come up with the facetious term youthened. So, oh, well, he's young and he's still finding his way, as opposed to apparently a 12-year-old was supposed to know that if he had a clearly toy gun, that he was going to be shot. But I don't know that it's a function of age as much as it is just about whether or not Black people are allowed to display firearms in public.
Yeah.
I mean, John Crawford was an adult in a Walmart in an open carry state.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was handling merchandise when he was shot.
Sure. And I think that is an entire issue. Absolutely. But I also think that precociousness is enlisted as an excuse with the younger kids in the sense that, okay, oh, well, I perceive that person as older and that's going to be my excuse.
I will agree that there is as you said, a weaponized assignment of precociousness given to young Black children who are perceived as being sexually aggressive, who are perceived as being physically aggressive and other things, and a disregard of the ways in which racialization plays out, and that it's about the expectation of the observer rather than the actual behavior of the child being assessed.
Yeah. And I think there's also the for girls, obviously you just mentioned that that for young Black girls they're assigned this, well, they're so sexually precocious kind of thing, but that also extends to other groups of girls who yes, it's weaponized as a means to exonerate sexual harassers and rapists, as to say, well, but this girl was so precocious and, sexually mature or whatever it was.
We have a problem societally where we conflate early onset of puberty with maturity and ability to give active and useful consent.
Yeah.
And we have confusion about what constitutes consent and whether children can consent, because in many, many other ways we say that children cannot consent. Right. And all of a sudden, when it comes to sexual attention from adults will claim that they can consent meaningfully. Mm-hmm. And yes, I think that assigning the word precocity there probably is useful because that's the word that gets assigned. And I think it's very deliberate because it plays on all of the other more overtly positive connotations of precocious.
Yeah.
And because we advocate for access for children who are intellectually precocious, it carries over and is used to urge access for children who have achieved sexual maturity faster.
Yep.
Except that a problem being that benefits for access to intellectually precocious or academically precocious children is of benefit, is access to education for the child, whereas as for sexually precocious, the benefit and the access is for the adult. The adults are the ones who are getting more access to the child. And that's a problem.
Yes, indeed it is.
I am noticing that all of our topics every week always have wider ramifications and social justice and societal ramifications, but precocity in particular seems to have extremely pointed commentary about.
Yeah, I mean, I knew it was going
to
to.
Society functions.
I was like, okay, let's go there.
Let's making sure it's blatant.
Let's bring this back to fiction for a minute. I mean, because here we are talking about all this stuff. I mean, I do see a lot of these issues pop up here and there in fiction. And I think there's always an opportunity for an author to be more careful and or more subtle with the way that they explore the ramifications of a particular type of character. And so yeah, this is why I think it's good to, just pick a topic and then, hey, here's the good side, here's the complicated social complications side, because a lot of those complications are often lost in fiction.
Yes.
And so this is an opportunity for us to say, well, look, here's some complications that you might want to think through before you just kind of slap this into your story, right?
So the reasons why a lot of people like to use precocious characters is because it eliminates the need to say, well, why did you as an adult all of a sudden embark on this path? Because it allows the author to claim there was some kind of predestination involved, right? For why this person as the character and the viewpoint.
Yeah. Actually, I will give some credit to J.K. Rowling for not making Harry Potter very good at school. Because when I started reading it, I was like, he's going to be so good at wizard school, right?
Well, no, Harry Potter was supposed to be the everyman, but Hermione's the precocious one.
Intellectually speaking, yeah, I would say.
Have you read the caustic social justice reframing of Harry Potter?
Which one?
Yeah, right.
The one that the snarky meme image, which said, "Oh yeah, Harry Potter, yet another entitled, inherited wealth white boy is declared to be the savior of the world." So,
yeah.
It's interesting what people project onto what Rowling wrote.
Yeah.
I'm not going to cast judgment on whether or not it's accurate, but
yeah. Well, actually,
there's so many different ways to see that.
And I think that writing child geniuses or overly mature children is potentially also a side effect of adults being the people writing the children.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to say that
maybe not wanting to delve into the research that would be necessary to portray children age appropriately.
Yeah, I sort of feel like it's sometimes a failure, or to want to write children, right? Like you're like, because you're a very, very serious adult writer, but you have to have this kid character. But by God, they're not going to be some regular kid. Ugh, they're going to be special. Ugh.
I don't know.
Because, I mean, I write middle grade, and I try very hard to put myself in the shoes of these 12-year-old characters, and make them 12-year-olds, not tiny adults.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people are writing on purpose or unintentionally overly precocious kids because they just want a tiny adult.
A lot of it is wish fulfillment.
Yeah, or the kid you wish you were, like you wish you'd been brilliant, you wish you'd been a genius violinist who spoke 5 languages and was like amazing at math, right?
And I gotta tell you, you're wrong. You're wrong. You just are.
Yeah, wish fulfillment definitely affects a lot of the way that fiction happens.
Yeah,
I've also seen the opposite of children being written to be extraordinarily stupid compared to the way children actually are.
Yes, that's true too. we could talk for over an hour on portraying children. Maybe we should do that at some point.
I think that'd be a great topic.
I think without having specific examples, because I'm very bad at remembering my sense is that we tend to see either groups of precocious children, schools or clubs or whatever, or one in an entire population. So I get the feeling that I've rarely seen an actual population where there are, some of the kids are precocious at something, and then there's the rest of them. And if you have more than one, they are either best buddies or bitter rivals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not how anything works.
Yeah. Well, okay, so we're at the end of our hour. It got really interesting there. Yeah, this is, honestly, this is one of the things that gives this show spark. So I'm really glad that we go to these tricky spots because, I mean, they're worth going to. It's worth sort of pushing in there and disentangling some of the threads in there.
I have a question. Did we accidentally silence Brian in asking him to mute because of where he was?
With all the background noise, I just stayed muted most of the time. And there was a couple of things that I could have said, but it was like, well, I don't really need to. So, it's all good.
Before we head to the after party, let me just remark that next week we are scheduled to have Spencer Ellsworth come and talk to us about, I believe, his fiction work and also maybe outdoor survival.
Ooh.
So I'm still reaching out to confirm with Spencer that he's going to be our guest next week, but that is my expectation. I've had it on the schedule for a while, so I expect that will probably not fall apart suddenly. Anyway, I'm looking forward to talking to Spencer, and Children is now written down, and we're going to talk about it in the future.
That's
and if nobody else has anything more to add on the precociousness topic that is burning in their souls, then we will adjourn for now. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'm stopping the broadcast.